Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Parenting Through the Parsha with Rabbi Matt Shapiro.
There are some ways in which this Hanukkah is, of course, like other Hanukkahs for us, lighting candles, singing songs. Gonna have some latkes tonight. It's been a lovely holiday so far, and hopefully that'll continue. Play some dreidel, kids will start arguing within just 30 seconds of playing. It'll be great. And there are also some ways that the holiday's been a little different. And that's showing up in terms of thinking about where and how we situate our celebration of the holiday relative to the world around us. I'll explain what I mean by that. This is the first year for a couple of months we've had one of our kids in a public school, in an LAUSD school. And though, yes, the grade sang a Hanukkah song at the performance, there was a holiday celebration that I'm sure 25, 30 years ago would have been a Christmas celebration. And now it's more culturally sensitive. There's, a variety of holidays that are celebrated. But even after the grade sang that Hanukkah song, there were non-Hanukkah songs as well. And so that feels different than what we've had before. And it's also showing up in terms of how we're thinking about high school for our oldest, who's in 8th grade, and we're wondering what high school will look like. It's certainly possible that he'll go to a Jewish school. It's also possible that he won't, that he'll go to a school that's a public school, and that will feel very different than in what Hanukkah would look like for him next year. But even as we sit in celebrating this holiday and seeing what's happening with our middle and thinking about next year, it feels a little different. And so what's showing up is what I would call a Miketz Hasmonean dichotomy. What I mean by that is we're in Parshat Miketz, we're in part of the Joseph story where Joseph is down in Egypt, he interprets some dreams, he is raised up to power, and he assimilates pretty thoroughly. He gets an Egyptian name, he's clad in Egyptian finery, finds an Egyptian wife, and when his brothers finally see him years later, they don't recognize him. And yes, it has been some time, but it's pretty clear that Joseph has thoroughly fit in to Egyptian culture, into Egyptian life, which seems to be somewhat at odds with the Maccabees, with the Hasmoneans, who in their fight to rededicate the temple, of course, one way of thinking about this story is that it was Jews versus Greeks. The Greeks destroyed the temple and the Jews fought back. And there also seems to be a way of reading what unfolded historically as an argument between groups of Jews, that there were Jews who were pretty Hellenized, who were assimilated into Greek life around them. And there was this group that was very staunchly against that impulse, that wanted a purer version, as it were, of what Judaism was, and fought back against this Hellenizing impulse. So that seems to be a tension. So it's interesting to think about how that tension might be resolved, or at least how to dance with that tension. In the Talmud, when they talk about when you should light the Chanukiah, we're told that it should happen between sunset and when people disappear from the marketplace. And it's that sort of dusk time. And the word used for people is really the word for feet, for foot, for regel. And the Kedushat Levi, Rav Levi Yitzchak, talks about this. He does some wordplay, and he says it's actually not about feet. It's about that which is ragil, or ordinary, or regular. And so what you should do is you should light the Hanukkah candles. You should look at the Hanukkah candles until you've lost your sense of what is ordinary, until what's ordinary has departed, that we each function in the world in a way that we get habituated to what's happening around us. And what Hanukkah does is it shakes us out of that way of seeing things, to see the miracle of Hanukkah, and maybe even also to see the miracles around us. And it can be, of course, uncomfortable for things to get shaken up. And it's also important for us to be able to learn, for us to be able to grow, for us to be able to grapple with our lives. And that's not in a big way, but for us a little bit this year with Hanukkah, it's shaking up our sense of, okay, well, what does this holiday mean? And how can we think about the way in which we fit into the world around us versus being a little more cloistered or closed off? And how do we work through that? And I think part of that is also true of parenting, that I can assume that my kids are a certain way, but they're always learning, they're always growing. That's what I want for them. So I shouldn't get too locked into that one way of seeing any one kid. And it's also important to recognize that different kids are different. It's not just one kid multiplied by 3 who I'm parenting. Different kids are different. And different kids are going to need different things at different times, right? It's not just one way of being, that I need to be open to seeing that that which is familiar, that which is sort of ordinary, can depart, and that having those candles lit can help illuminate that fact. And so that seeming dichotomy of the Joseph bit of the narrative and the Hasmonean impulse for something that is more rigid, that can also be a dance. It doesn't just have to be one or the other. There can be some flow and some movement between those two seeming polar opposites to figure out what's needed in this moment, what's needed for this kid, what's needed in this situation. And that hopefully by trying to model that can in turn bring some illumination to how our family, to how our kids, to how all of us can experience the world, even if it feels a little destabilizing, right? That shaking things up can feel a little uncomfortable, that kindling that light, that illumination can bring some clarity, and maybe even a little bit of hope in terms of thinking about how we can navigate a situation that might feel a little fraught or tricky, and that we can get through that, not just together in this moment, but seeing that that's a dynamic, that's a tension that we've navigated for years, and that we continue to make it through and to find a way even potentially to celebrate that.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.